call our names then.
All right, Mrs. Chilton.
Here.
Dr. Estrad.
Here.
Mr. O'Neill.
Here.
Mr. Rue.
Here.
Mr. Copeland.
Here. Mr. Hecht. It's
Yes, thank you, Commissioner. So tonight we have one work session item for you. Joining me on the screen as well is Tom Franzen, as he's been instrumental in the progression of this project, and so he will also chime in throughout the presentation as well. But we wanted to give you an update. If you recall, back at retreat, we discussed the plaza and overall redevelopment of the plaza here at City Hall in conjunction with a project that we have associated with the parking garage that is underneath this building. And so at retreat we talked about the need for the project on the garage, but what we suggested at retreat is we take a deeper look. This is the opportunity, as we're going to have a portion of the plaza torn up, that we should look at what are ways that we can revitalize and revamp the plaza setting. As it's grown tired over the years, obviously we've had a lot of maintenance as it relates to the concrete, and we've replaced that numerous times in different sections throughout the year. And so we just thought it was the opportunity to do some planning associated with the project that we know we're going to have to move forward with. And so from retreat, obviously one of the goals and objectives continues to be downtown redevelopment and revitalization, and we believe the plaza ties directly into that, because that was created when this core block was cleared. It was created as that community gathering space, and we know it as that with many of the great events that are hosted there, with Culture Fest, Holiday in the City, and then other rental opportunities that I know our clerk manages through. Obviously 2020 has prevented us moving forward with a lot of the activities that happen here on the plaza, but we're hopeful into the future that will not be the case and we'll be able to move forward. So I had Tom reach out to a couple design development firms, and one of those firms was Moda 4, which is out of Dayton. They are a architecture firm that works nationally, and just their expertise and their experience around public spaces and active spaces, because what's important is to activate the plaza, to create a gathering spot that people feel they can come down just on a weekday and enjoy time with their family, friends, co-workers, and so forth. And so Moda 4 has a lot of experience in their past design work around those public spaces, and even when they're developing private investment, private development projects, they usually incorporate some type of public gathering space as a part of that overall development, because they think that's important moving forward. Again, we'll touch on the garage project itself. So we have to replace the rubber roof membrane that surrounds the expansion joint for the garage. With that, we will be tearing up at least a 10 to 15 foot section or swath of concrete. Pretty much goes from the center line, that tree just out there, down to the center part of the plaza, and then out the other way. So we're going to have a pretty large scale project to replace that rubber membrane. It has a 25 to 30 year lifespan, where obviously this building was completed in 1979, and so we're well beyond that 25 to 30 years. So when you see the water that is leaking in the basement, that is the reason why, is because we're having issues with that rubber membrane that supports and covers the expansion joint. So again, we felt it was pertinent that while we have the plaza torn up, we should look at, again, as a planning opportunity, what can the plaza be for the future as part of the community, because it really is a community space. And so Moda 4 held some stakeholder meetings, which included various business owners and stakeholders of the downtown area, just to get some thoughts and ideas. And they started with a SWOT exercise, which is strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and kind of looking at, okay, what is the plaza? What are the strengths of the plaza? What are those weaknesses that exist? What are those future opportunities to expand and revitalize? And then what are the other threats that could exist as it relates to looking at redevelopment of the plaza into the future? And so they really broke the plaza as a section of 4 quadrants in the core block area. So quadrant 1 really makes up the section that many people refer to as the ice rink, because I believe at one time they probably used to have ice down there in the winter and stuff, in activity. I never was able to participate in that, so I don't know if it did or not. But they commonly refer to it as the ice rink. Quadrant 2 makes up the E.F. Hutton property. Quadrant 3 is the green space park area on the southeast corner. And then, of course, Quadrant 4 makes up City Hall and the outdoor plaza space directly associated with our building. So in Quadrant 1, it makes up the existing, which includes the fountains and hardscape and sculptural figures. And then they kind of talk about what are some opportunities with that. And I'll dig a little bit deeper in that in some upcoming photos, but they looked at it as two phases. So you could start out by establishing some green space. So again, it is a hardscape concrete. That concrete has been replaced throughout the years. There's drainage issues that exist. So when you see that ice rink area, after a rainfall, it's usually flooded because of the drainage issues. We have to come in and make sure the pipes are clear and stuff, get water circulating, and that finally clears that out. So there's some challenges with that. So looking at potential green space from a stormwater perspective is an opportunity that they see there. They also see it as kind of a passive recreational area. So whether we institute, right now we put the curb ramp in there so that food trucks could possibly go down into that lower section and set up, and it creates kind of that amenity for the public that they can go in there and enjoy food, but also kids can run around and so forth. So they see a short-term phase of maybe reinventing and recreating that space, because right now it's kind of sectioned off and sealed off. Also, the fountains are a growing problem for us. The fountains are a major maintenance item. There would be major repair to those fountains if they stayed in that location long term. And then it also becomes a challenge from a staffing standpoint, because right now all of the pump system is underground, and that is a confined space entry for any of our workers that go down in that space. So it takes at least 2 workers to be able to just go in and work on that space. So it becomes a staffing issue as well for us. Long term, they see this as an opportunity for kind of mixed use redevelopment. They see, so the original plan for the plaza back in the 70s actually envisioned it being more of a center plaza of hardscape, and each corner would have a built environment, would have an actual structure on it. So they proposed, and you'll see some renderings here in a second that show what that mixed use. And Tom, I don't know if you want to add kind of the makeup of what that building could look like and what it would look like would be good.
So you're talking about Quadrant 1. The mixed use building opportunity there is quite intriguing. When we talked about it with our group, it could feature a 3 to 4 story office building with retail on the first floor. And it's really, when we looked back, Motive 4 looked back at the original plans for the construction of the plaza, it obviously envisioned a building being built there. And there's some great opportunities to utilize the garage by expanding the garage space for that building, which makes it more developable when you're looking at it from a development perspective. If you're going to have housing or residential in the top, you need to have parking. And so there's lots of strong elements from the original planning that went into place for the City Hall Plaza, as well as we look at it today. So these things that they're mentioning here as the possible reuses for Quadrant 1, I think the stakeholders and city staff felt like the mixed-use office building was the most intriguing and would probably add the most value to the plaza, but also the surrounding uses downtown. The one thing I did want to point out too, Bryan, is at the bottom of these slides, you'll see, the words inviting, scale, shade, connection, materiality, trees, illumination, interactive sound, water, etc. Those were all themes that resonated with the stakeholders. So as a result of those engagement with the stakeholders, those were the themes that kind of were born out of that. And that's what Motive 4 worked on, as they envisioned reuse of some of these spaces. So I just wanted to make that note.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And you'll see as we get into some of the conceptual drawings, you'll start to see how they pull those elements in to create scale, to create additional opportunity for green space or trees or lighting. Because right now, and we saw it during the time of the protests and so forth, when we had individuals, one of the challenges we actually had on the plaza is it is a very dark environment. It's a very dark space. And so it's easy to kind of hide and blend in with your surroundings with the trees and so forth. So making it a more inviting and friendly space through additional lighting and landscaping can go a long way in making improvements to the plaza and making it that community gathering space that I believe the community feels it is.
I'm having trouble picturing where the building would be.
Yes, so I will jump to a slide here soon and it'll lay that out for you. So the quadrant 2, I won't spend much time on it, but that incorporates the E.F. Hutton building. Just to give the commissioners an update on the E.F. Hutton building, it is actually coming up for foreclosure sale or sheriff's auction sale in early October. The first sale, it actually has a $1 million minimum bid on it. I do not foresee anybody taking on that responsibility with a $1 million price tag. If it does not sell at that first auction, it will come up 2 weeks later and actually have no minimum bid other than making sure you compensate for the taxes. So it'll be interesting over time here in the near future what happens to that building as well as the State Theater, because the State Theater is tied up in that same foreclosure process. But knowing that and knowing it's a private investment, same with the potential retail office and residential building that Tom spoke of in quadrant 1, we would foresee those as private development opportunities of the plaza as opposed to public space opportunities, which is the things that we will take the next steps on.
Are they auctioning both buildings off at the same time or just this one?
No, they're both available at the same time, but they're separate
Separate
pieces
parcels.
of real estate. I think the minimum bid on the state is $335,000 or something.
Who,
That include the parking lot?
No, the parking lot is not a part
Lagos,
of that
right?
State
Yeah.
Theater.
who currently owns those properties?
The bank.
In Texas, as I recall?
I believe their main headquarters is out of Texas, but I can't recall off the top of my head. But it's Peer Financial Group is the main holder of the mortgage, and so pushing forward with the foreclosure.
Thank you.
Quadrant 3 makes up the existing green space area in the park. It's a flat green space. And again, what they talked about is it's kind of separated off because of the slope, the terrain. So they actually looked at either doing it as a tiered lawn, which is kind of a stair-step lawn and can be used. I envision for Culture Fest as an example, it kind of creates natural seating, which is almost like an amphitheater or stage seating. So the performers could perform and you have audience build up and they can see down and look over the performances. Holiday in the City the same way when they have bands and so forth as a part of that festivity. I could see that green space being kind of a tiered lawn seating area or amphitheater type style seating, and I'll show more close examples of that later on in the presentation. Or they talk about creating more inviting a play park. Right now in downtown, there's not much opportunity. If you have a young family and so forth, there's not really any opportunity. They pull examples from Dallas, Texas, out in Phoenix, Arizona, of some of the areas that they're really focusing on that family environment in their downtown as well, and creating spaces that families can come and interact with the downtown environment, but also have a place for their kids as a part of the downtown as well. And then quadrant 4 makes up City Hall. And again, so the building is the primary space, but then they see the plaza area. So immediately down here where we set up the main stage for Culture Fest, and Holiday in the City sets up their main stage, is kind of the main focal point of being an event space. And so they like the space. They like that venue. What they think we need to do is make it look less tired. So kind of update it. And they show that. And again, we'll show some illustrations where they do new railings and seating for people to be able to enjoy that event space as it exists today. And so this kind of just shows an overall of the different ideas that they showed. So this is a mixed-use tiered lawn. So just to give reference, so here's City Hall where we sit right now. This is the proposed mixed-use building, which is right at the corner of Main and Fountain. So if you can envision the fountains run right along the front here, and it really takes up that depressed or ice rink area that exists on the plaza today. And then the tiered lawn that exists in the southeast corner, and then obviously the E.F. Hutton building. And then they just show the green corridor. So if we were, in the short term wanted to add some additional green amenity, we could take out that ice rink area and put in a green lawn that could be play fields. One of the examples they said a lot of communities are experimenting with is not even actual grass, but putting in the turf type grass. And then it creates an opportunity for, I think the game's called futsal, or just some small fields. So again, you're activating that space and encouraging both kids and adults to come down and interact in that space. And then the last one is the mixed use with the play park. So taking the current green space and making it more of a play attraction amenity for kids and so forth and families, but then also incorporating the mixed use retail residential building in that northwest corner. So this gives you a kind of a more overall plan of the mixed-use tiered lawn development, which is really kind of their recommendation long-term with the community. So adding some additional green space. One of the things, and you'll see a picture, is really emphasizing this is your main kind of entrance into the plaza. A lot of people come off of Fountain Avenue, either by parking in the now garage or that parking lot, or the lot over here next to the State Theater, but making this kind of a colonnade entrance, but also taking in your north and south entry points and just improving them with additional lighting, plantings, green space, as well as some seating and bench areas. And then they cap it off. One of the things we asked them to look at, so if the fountains were removed, we would still like some type of water element or water feature. And one of the things, obviously, that's very popular right now are kind of the splash pads or water pads, kind of at the green as an example of one where it's just water, various water shooting up out of the ground and kids playing it and so forth. It doesn't have necessarily any structure to it. It's just spray fountains that are coming out of the ground. So they recommended that kind of as that central point on the plaza itself. And so here are some of the renderings that they put together. So this shows the colonnade that kind of goes through, so it adds additional the decorative street lighting, additional trees. You see they take into account that part of the plaza actually sits over the garage and acts as a roof, so it's hard to do actual plantings on the surface, so they have these decorative boxes that exist there, and just really cleans it up. And then this shows the example of what that four-story building could look like. So they show retail, restaurant on the first floor, and then residential on the top 3 floors. Again, that would be something that we would approach private developers about, possibly even do an RFP to gauge interest in that space to see what could happen on the plaza there. This just gives another rendering or another view kind of looking towards the E.F. Hutton building. Tom, do you want to talk a little bit about what they envisioned for the E.F. Hutton building? Again, that would be a private investment and private developers project, but it really builds kind of that character and adds a sense of place when you're in the E.F. Hutton building with the plaza as well. There we go.
So, yeah, you had a slide earlier that kind of covered it, but, what was kind of interesting with what they'd proposed was, the skeleton of, or the skin really of that building being all black. It kind of looms over downtown or over the plaza, not very inviting at all. There's nothing really to engage the street level. So what they recommended was kind of peeling that off for three floors there, and then converting the first floor to a retail space. so that the public could engage at the street level, but also opening it up as it comes onto the plaza. So you see the tables and chairs there. That might be a restaurant or something is what they're envisioning there. The good thing, the reason we really like working with Motive 4 too is these concepts, really don't drive or require a lot of money. So yes, there's investments in buildings and things like that, but we really tried to challenge them to come up with concepts that are achievable or scalable as we look to do these things. So this would require private investment, but I think it enables us as a community to see how this building could be repurposed and become more a part of downtown as opposed to kind of this big block that just kind of dominates the plaza today. So we really like that idea, but obviously that's going to take private investment to do that.
Again, this just shows, as Tom said, if you didn't know, E.F. Hutton is actually constructed very similar to City Hall. So you see the columns that face out, that's exactly what that building looks like. The glass is actually a skin that was placed on top of that. So they were built very in a similar fashion.
Those panels off, it will look just like this building.
Yes. Yep. So real quick, just to jump back, I know I forwarded, I wanted to show that building, but I think I went ahead, sorry. So this just shows that, again, that colonnade at night, just to kind of show the lighting, again, creating an inviting, attractive space. And if that retail development would transpire in the future, it kind of gives you a perspective of, that outdoor, indoor feel that could be accommodated on the plaza. This kind of gives you today's look and what it looks like, and then what it could look like, just the enhanced greenery, obviously the built environment and structures, but just gives you an idea to how that could be dressed up and really seen as an inviting entrance into that core plaza area. We just talked about the E.F. Hutton building, but this shows, you can kind of see them on the map. I know they're tough to see, but you can see the water shooting out, so that center water feature again, and that kids and other families can enjoy together on the plaza. This shows kind of what Tom was talking about, a closer look of the E.F. Hutton building. So if this was restaurant retail in the E.F. Hutton building, there could be steps down to the plaza, because right now that side of the building is really shut off. There's a planter, but there's no direct interaction between the E.F. Hutton building and the plaza itself. All of their entrance, ingress, egress is to the Limestone and Main Street sides. This just shows the plaza and kind of how they envision dressing it up, just making it a little bit more inviting, additional lighting, some improvements to the railing and so forth. And then the tiered lawn layout that I talked about on the green space just shows how you can take advantage of that slope that exists today and use it to your advantage and have that tiered seating and other just more inviting look for the plaza versus separate spaces. And that's what they talked about a lot, is each quadrant is kind of sectioned off into its own space right now and doesn't really interact or play together. And so they encouraged us to look into how can we make all four spaces, all four quadrants interact together.
So the plaza itself out here would be sort of freshened up, but it would basically be the same space where Culture Fest or whatever could
Yes,
still
there would
occur.
still be the same opportunities for those types of events. The only space that potentially could be decreased is along Main Street if that building would go, but there'd still be plenty of hard space opportunity for Holiday in the City, Culture Fest, and other events to be, because again, this is the community gathering space. We want this to be a focal point. So yes, it would be reimagined and reinvented, but there would be the same opportunity for the same events.
So Bryan, while you're talking about that, are you planning to talk about the funding for this?
Yes, I will talk about the next steps.
Thank you.
And then really the last piece I wanted to share was they actually envisioned us moving Oracle's vision. So Oracle's vision sits out in front of City Hall right now. What they talked about again is the way it was designed was to be an open, inviting space, and what we've done is actually closed off view sheds and viewscapes by putting things like Oracle's vision right in the way. of that pass-through through City Hall, which is natural light, and I have a picture here to show you that. So here's where City Hall sits today. This is, if you remove that, you could see the interaction that's going on the plaza. If there's an event going on, you can actually see through that opening there, as opposed to it really being blocked off right now with Oracle's vision. So we're doing some research into that, what that would take. There's been actually 2 attempts to move Oracle's vision in the past. Both of those failed. So we're doing some more research. So I know some people on Facebook and social media have commented. Some want to see it go completely. Some wouldn't mind if it moved. And then there's some that want to see it there before. So before we would come with a recommendation to you of actually moving it, we would have kind of that plan and process in place.
Good.
It would be moved. It would stay on the plaza, but it would be potentially moved. And one of the things, so we talked with Kevin Rose, who obviously Turner Foundation and a historian. One of the challenges with the art right now is the David Blaine, who's the artist. One of his pieces are meant to be touched and pictures taken by them and so forth. And right now it's kind of on its own island, and you can't really get to it easily. It's not readily accessible like it was when it was first constructed. And so part of the Motive 4's plan was to actually move this up to that southeast quadrant, which is the green space, and it becomes an interactive piece.
I don't know if I
Again,
like that. That's got to grow on me, Bryan.
Okay. Well, like I said, we will come with a plan and recommendation before we would do any of that.
Okay, thank you.
And I think that's it. So
Like an Iron Man.
next steps for the project. So again, the E.F. Hutton building and the potential retail residential building on the corner of Main and Fountain, those would be private development, private investments that would happen. We're really focused on the public space as a part of the parking garage project. And so we are working on moving forward with design of both the parking garage repairs that need to be made, so to the expansion joint and the rubber membrane, but then also looking at what public space elements, so additional landscaping, trees, lighting, can we incorporate and include in the project. And if you recall, back in, I believe, May or June, Commission approved funding for that piece of it. It was $1 million that was set aside for both the garage piece as well as the plaza redevelopment. The garage is estimated at about $600,000, so that would leave about $400,000 of that to go towards the public space element, so freshening up and improving the plaza. Again, we'll work with a design firm. We've worked with Desmond, which actually designed our garage. They've already done some preliminary engineering on our garage work, but they'll work with Motive 4 to develop an RFP that would go out for design bids. And we would hopefully move forward with the garage project and some of the public space elements in 2021. Because again, our garage is leaking and we do need to address that issue sooner rather than later.
Bryan, when we had the garage repaired several years ago because it was leaking, we spent, I forget what the number was. You'll have to revisit that. Was there any kind of, is any of this that we're talking about doing now not caused by that, but just broke down after it was repaired before? Or did the leaking ever stop? Or,
No, the
'cause
leaking.
we spent quite a bit of money.
Yeah, my understanding is we did more of a Band-Aid fix, and Mark may remember.
Worked on this falling concrete.
Yeah, and
It's exacerbating the concrete issues that we do have in the basement and really needs to be addressed.
I don't doubt that it needs addressed. I just wondered where is this would be an extension of what we've already begun, or it just failed and we're starting over?
I would say it's an ongoing extension of work.
Okay.
Continued wear and tear and aging of the facility.
yeah,
When-
and again, we replaced some concrete and some of the under drains underneath that. We have never replaced or done any repairs to the expansion joint or the rubber membrane associated with that. And that is the item that has a 25 to 30 year lifespan, and we're obviously over year 40 at this point, so,
Okay.
All I can say, you only patch for so many times.
yes.
Well, is the problem that we're addressing kind of like in the building industry? If you have a flat roof, it's going to leak eventually?
Yes.
So this is, once
Yeah.
we repair this again, this may last for a period of time, but you can face maybe having to do something down the road.
Yep, 30 to 40
Okay.
years again, we would probably have to do something. So the plaza, most of the plaza is essentially a roof, and it's a flat roof, and so we have to maintain and address that. And what was nice about Moda 4 as well is some of the design elements they incorporated in actually hopefully would extend that life a little bit by putting additional under drains and things in to hold moisture better than what the concrete does, because concrete starts to crack and water seeps in and there's not much you can do at that point. Whereas if you do some more natural landscaping, maybe some additional stormwater retention in other parts of the plaza, you can hopefully extend the life of those investments that you're putting in.
Bryan, I would ask you to pass along a compliment that was received this weekend. We were entertaining some visitors from state of Iowa, and I took them on a tour of downtown, and one of the comments they made was how clean and well-maintained the city hall area looked, as well as how clean the surrounding streets and sidewalks were. So if you have the opportunity, or Chris, if Chris is listening in, please extend our compliments to our staff as well as the business people downtown and making our community attractive. It was something that was totally unsolicited on my part. Our guests just volunteered it and said, man, this looks really good. This looks nice. So please
Thank you.
pass it along.
Yes, definitely will, and even more of a commendation for our service center crews is, as you know, with our budget constraints this year, we were not able to hire seasonals, and in the past, we've been able to hire 1 or 2 seasonals that kind of maintained the plaza, the Esplanade, and other areas. We've had to pick that up with our existing internal staffing to be able to do that, and they've done a phenomenal job with short resources this year.
Absolutely.
I just want to point out we're 15 minutes beyond the time when we were supposed to start the 7 o'clock hearing. Is there other important things we need to deal with?
Nope, that is all of our work session.
Commissioners, okay? Okay? Do we have to close it? Is there a motion to close the work session?
So moved, Estrop.
Second?
Second.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. O'Neill,
Yes.
Mr. Rue,
Yes.
Mrs. Chilton,
Yes.
Dr. Estrop,
Yes.
Mr. Copeland.
Yes. The public hearing scheduled for 7 o'clock is called to order. The roll call from the work session will cover this also. The purpose of this meeting is for public hearing to consider proposed change for a development plan. Has proper legal notice been given to the hearing?
Notice of a public hearing for the purpose of considering the proposed amendment to the OPDH development plan located in the Derby Glen Village subdivision, being 22 individual parcels, was published in the Springfield News and Sun, a newspaper of general circulation within the city. Attached hereto is a true and correct copy of the legal notice published on August 17, 2020.
I move that the communication be ordered received, recorded in the minutes, and filed.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Clerk will call the roll.
Mrs. Chilton,
Yes.
Mr. Rue,
Yes.
Mr. O'Neill,
Yes.
Dr. Estrop,
Yes.
Mr. Copeland.
Yes. Staff report.
Good evening, Commissioners. Can everyone hear me okay and see the map on the screen?
Good to go.
Okay, so this is for an amendment to an existing OPDH plan. This is for Derby Court. You'll see the subdivision outlined in yellow on the screen. It's bordered by Roscommon, Braytonburn, and Secretariat. For the surrounding land use and zoning, It's surrounded in all directions by residential zoned RS5. And here is a view of the entrance to the development off of Secretariat. For the background in this case, in 2013, the OPDH called Derby Glen Village was approved by the City Commission. Single-family homes have been constructed on 20 of the 22 lots so far. Lots range in size from approximately 0.12 acre to 0.36 acre. The applicant is requesting to amend the OPDH plan to not install sidewalks. Chapter 1211.01F states sidewalks shall be required on both sides of the right-of-way in all subdivisions located in single-family residential zoning districts where lot frontage averages less than 100 feet. The applicant requests not install sidewalks within this subdivision. The applicant states this is because of the small lot size. The applicant states adding sidewalks would reduce the amount of green space in the front yards of the homes, and the homeowners do not want them because of that. The applicant requested the same variance when the subdivision was initially submitted to the City Planning Board. Planning and zoning comment for this case: the small size of the lots combined with the existing amount of impervious surface in the front yards would lead to a practical difficulty adding sidewalks. Adding to the amount of impervious surface would increase the amount of stormwater runoff into the city's stormwater treatment system. A portion of this area is in the floodplain, and additional impervious surface may displace floodwater elsewhere. Since that time, the uniqueness of this development became evident once the homes were built. Not having sidewalks would not be out of character for this development. The staff recommendation for this case is approval of the request to amend the OPDH plan to not install public sidewalks. The City Planning Board unanimously recommended approval, and I can answer questions.
Are there any questions of the,
Yes, were there any objections?
No, there were no objections at the meeting.
And could you just explain briefly to our citizens why we are even here from the beginning?
So this is a housing development that was specifically approved for the site. They decided to go this direction because the homes are built closer to the property lines than what is allowed by code. So going with the planned development overlay was a way to make this development work. Anytime a development like this gets approved, any material changes to it have to be approved by City Planning Board and then the City Commission. And so that's why we're here tonight, to amend that plan to remove the sidewalks from it.
Thank you. And at the last planning board, I believe a large portion of the residents showed up. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. I
Okay.
forget the number, but it was a significant number of the residents who live there.
Thank you.
anything else from commissioners? There are a motion to, do we don't have anybody who wants to speak from the outside, do we?
We may have somebody.
The applicant is present. I'll ask.
The applicant care to speak?
Jim, would you like to add any additional feedback or comments?
While you're waiting on that, Warren, the only comment, I did drive it this past weekend, and, you know, having built several houses myself, I can tell you, it's one thing to look at a plan on paper, and it's another thing when they start building it, and it does shrink on you. And I'm just glad that the city is able to go along with this developer because of the investment that has been made out there so quickly. And if you just looked at, anybody gets a chance to watch, if they would have put sidewalks in, the people You'd think the houses are set close together. When you put the sidewalk in the front with a setback, they're going to be almost on their front porch. So again, this was a really good decision on the planning board's part to recognize the situation and the investment that has been made there. So,
And I would like to thank the planning board because they took time out to find out, our city zoning and plans and everything say that sidewalks needed to be added. So I remember the first meeting where the staff was like, okay, why are not sidewalks added? And they took time out to talk to, I believe, staff and firefighters and.
Can you hear
so
me?
I just want to commend our planning board for taking their
Hello?
time and doing their due diligence.
Off again, yeah.
Jim, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Okay.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello?
We can hear you, Jim.
The thing on the left is,
Can't hear us.
Yeah, you had the mic on.
I don't think they can hear us.
or anything now.
Yeah, we just got a speaker. Okay.
hey Siri, call David Estrop, mobile.
That's Hobson.
I don't have my phone tonight.
There, Bryan, pull up a small green bar.
It's ringing through here. Oh. Oh, it-
I'd mute him, Brian.
Can you call Scott Thompson?
and I don't have his cell number.
I'd mute him. I'd mute him so they don't say anything
Can,
because they don't know they're unmuted.
Hey, Jim, this is Bryan. Can you hear me? Can you hear me, Jim? Hello? Hey, Jim, can you hear me? Jim, are you there?
Be careful.
Gary. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hello?
We can't hear them at all.
Oh, no, nothing's going on.
Yeah.
Use them again.
Mute him.
Just move on, unless you had specific questions for the applicant. Thank you.
I mean,
Their motion to adjourn?
So moved. Estrop.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mrs. Chilton,
Yes.
Mr. Rue,
Yes.
Mr. O'Neill,
yes.
Dr. Estrop? Yes. Mr. Copeland?
Yes. The formal meeting of the city commission is called,
Proclamation next.
yes, we can do the proclamation. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jill.
Kevin.
You're welcome.
This is a proclamation honoring Small Business Week. It's really a privilege to be able to read this because of the period of time that I've been in business for myself. So, whereas America's progress has been driven by pioneers who think big, take risks, and work hard, and from the storefront shops that anchor our community to the high-tech startups that keep America on the cutting edge, small businesses are the backbone, and I repeat, the backbone of our economy and the cornerstones of our nation's promise. Whereas Springfield's own Small Business Development Center works tirelessly to help nearly 300 aspiring entrepreneurs and business owners achieve the dream of being their own boss and creating new jobs for the people of Springfield. Whereas the City of Springfield has been the largest financial supporter of the Springfield Small Business Development Center since 1984, and whereas the Springfield Small Business Development Center has just been recognized as the Small Business Administration's SBDC Center of Excellence and Innovation for Region 5, placing it among the top 1% of SBDCs in the country and number 1 in a 6-state region. Whereas the President of the United States has proclaimed National Small Business Week every year since 1963 to highlight the programs and the services available to entrepreneurs through the U.S. Small Business Administration and other governmental agencies. Now Warren R. Copeland, Mayor of the City of Springfield, President of the City Commission, hereby proclaims that September the 22nd through September the 24th be recognized as Small Business Week in Springfield and urges its citizens to support and join in this national effort to help America's small businesses do what they do best, grow their business, create jobs, and ensure that our communities remain as vibrant tomorrow as they are today. And I believe, is Rob there?
I'm here.
Rob, congratulations, first of all. I really admire everything that you do every day. It's a tough nut. Feel free to make any comments you'd like to make.
I appreciate the proclamation, and it is truly an honor to do what I get to do at the SBDC. I'm very, very thankful for the support that we get from the City of Springfield. Without it, we really don't exist. There's no other way to say that. Thankful for our board of directors, who has been right there every step of the way the past few years with me, that has allowed us to grow to this point where we're getting this national recognition. It's crazy, it's humbling, and to me, it came like a few years earlier because I feel like we are just getting started. There's a whole lot more that I know that I'd like to see accomplished here in the city of Springfield. But I'm proud to lead the center and very excited about what's happening in Springfield. The reason why we're getting these awards is because there's a real energy, a real momentum in this city, and we are just one piece of a larger ecosystem that is really humming right now. And I'm just proud to be along for the ride.
We appreciate everything you do, because I can just tell you, when I first got on the commission, the failure rate of small businesses, because they didn't know the rules, they wouldn't do certain things. The SBDC was very innovative in regards to getting people involved, and it's been a tremendous help.
As a kid, I used to sweep up at the Copeland Upholstery Shop in Silvis, Illinois, and I knew how hard my dad worked to keep that place open and build it up to a three-person operation at its best. And he could have used help from you. So I'm glad we have such a program in Springfield.
Rob, Dave Estrup, I just wanted to say, keep up the great work. It's paying off. It's paying off for not only individual business people, but also for our entire community. So congratulations to you and everyone involved, and keep up the great work.
And I just wanted to say I get lots of compliments on the SBC from people in the community who you have helped to start their own business. So great job.
Hey, Rob, this would probably be a good time to just drop a couple sentences about Springfield Hustles.
Yeah, thanks for the cue. Yeah, this is an exciting time right now. Not only is this National Small Business Week, but we are right in the throes of the second year of Springfield Hustles. Last year was a tremendous success. The winner walked away with $10,000 in cash and a $75,000 grand prize. We've upped the ante this year. The winner's going to take home $25,000, and this is something we do to build excitement in the city, which is what we need. We need more people to come out of the woodwork and say, you know what, I'm going to bet on myself and take a chance. It's that risk-taking mentality that I want to see cultivated in our city, and Springfield Hustles was a great step forward. So be looking out for the final pitch event. It's a very exciting event to tune into, and we're going to be broadcasting that live on Facebook. on November 12th, the Thursday.
Last year was great fun. Anybody else?
We're going to see that he gets this?
Yep.
Rob, we'll see that you get this.
Thank you very much, guys.
Okay. Now, would you join me in, well, let's have the roll call. We'll do a roll call for this meeting.
Mrs. Chilton?
Here.
Dr. Estrop?
Here.
Mr. O'Neill?
Here.
Mr. Rue?
Here.
Mr. Copeland?
Yes. Join me in the invocation, and then we will say the pledge. Our God, we're grateful for the opportunity to gather, to make decisions for this community. Help us to do it well and serve all of our citizens as best we can. In your name we pray. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
And to the republic for which it stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. O'Neill?
Yes.
Mrs. Chilton?
Yes.
Dr. Estrop?
Yes.
Mr. Rue?
Yes.
Mr. Copeland?
Yes. Clerk will proceed with first readings by title only.
Approving an amendment to the existing OPDH development plan located in the Derby Glen Village subdivision to remove the requirement for installation of public sidewalks. Authorizing the exercise of the city's option to renew agreements with the Huntington National Bank for treasury management, depository services, and security custody services for an amount not to exceed $50,000. Authorizing the city manager to enter into an LPA agreement number 33107, amendment number 1, between the city and the Ohio Department of Transportation in connection with the sidewalk project PID number 109478 to provide clarity regarding the funding sources.
Questions or comments on first readings from commissioners? Clerk will proceed with second readings.
Authorizing the annexation of and establishment of services to be furnished to the property owners at 4401 South Charleston Pike upon annexation to the city of Springfield, Ohio, and authorizing Jason T. Irick, Assistant Law Director, to prosecute the proceedings necessary to effect the annexation.
Move to adopt.
Second. Estrop.
It's been moved and seconded. Questions or comments from the commission? Clerk will call the roll.
Mrs. Chilton?
Yes.
Mr. O'Neill?
Yes.
Dr. Estrop?
Yes.
Mr. Rue?
Yes.
Mr. Copeland?
Yes.
Authorizing the city manager to enter into a contract with Rumpke of Ohio Incorporated for the city's 2020 collection of fall bagged leaves program for an amount not to exceed $57,500.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Questions or comments from the commission?
Yes. Can we have Chris one more time tell us the dates for the fall bag collection, the leaf collections?
Yes, Chris?
Yes, Commissioners, the fall bag leaf pickup will be on Saturday, November 7th and Saturday, December 5th this year.
I couldn't hear that, so say it a little louder.
Saturday, November 7th and Saturday, December 5th.
Thank you. And is
Thank
that on
you.
the website?
It is.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. O'Neill?
Yes.
Dr. Estrop?
Yes.
Mr. Rue?
Yes.
Mrs. Chilton?
Yes.
Mr. Copeland?
Yes.
Excuse me, Jill, could you read closer to the mic, please?
Sure.
Thank you.
Authorizing the city manager to enter into a contract with Gary Gilbert Jr., doing business as Gilbert's Lawn Service, for abatement and nuisance conditions services as needed by the city for an amount not to exceed $40,000.
Move to adopt.
Second. Estrop.
Been moved and seconded. Questions or comments from the commission?
I have one. The next two readings say the same, and I don't know whether you've ever explained this. Is this going to be 40,000, the most we're going to spend, but it may be divided among 3 people, or is it 40 each?
That is correct. It's 40,000, and then that's what we will spend in total, but we can spread it to the 3 different contractors.
Gotcha.
It's nice to have options.
I agree with you.
Anyone else? Clerk will call the roll.
Mrs. Chilton?
Yes.
Mr. O'Neill?
Yes.
Dr. Estrab?
Yes.
Mr. Rue?
Yes.
Mr. Copeland?
Yes.
Authorizing the city manager to enter into a contract with OMAC Hauling Incorporated for abatement and nuisance condition services as needed by the city for an amount not to exceed $40,000.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Questions or comments from the commission? Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Rue?
Yes.
Dr. Estrab?
Yes.
Mrs. Chilton?
Yes.
Mr. O'Neill?
Yes.
Mr. Copeland?
Yes.
Authorizing the city manager to enter into a contract with Whitaker Hauling for abatement and nuisance condition services as needed by the city for an amount not to exceed $40,000.
Move to adopt.
Second, Esther.
Been moved and seconded. Questions or comments from the commission? Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. O'Neill?
Yes.
Mrs. Chilton?
Yes.
Dr. Estrab?
Yes.
Mr. Rue?
Yes.
Mr. Copeland?
Yes.
Authorizing and directing the city manager to dispose of a 1997 Navistar 4900 bucket truck, being property owned by the city and no longer needed for municipal purposes, and should be disposed of pursuant to codified ordinance section 149.03.
Move to adopt.
Second, Esther.
Been moved and seconded. Questions or comments from the commission?
Brian, when we go to dispose of those, how does the public know where to go to bid, or however you're going to get rid of these?
Yeah, so in this specific case, we are donating to CTC and their forestry program. We have a great partnership and collaboration with CTC. They help us through their forestry program, and so this is an opportunity for us to help them as part of that program. Outside of that, our normal kind of disposal of public items, public goods goes through govdeals.com. Which is a website that you see most municipalities participate in, and it's an auction-style website that you can go in and place bids on public items that public agencies and entities are disposing of.
TCC will probably actually use this, correct?
CTC will actually use this equipment as part of their forestry program.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's actually their natural resources program, but
Now, from that program, some of those students also get seasonal work from the city?
yes, we work with them as interns and opportunities for seasonals as well when we do. Obviously, this summer we did not hire seasonals, but we still work with CTC. But yes, many of those kids will come on and help and assist in our forestry program.
Thank you.
I would also suspect that this will probably visit the auto maintenance program and provide some learning opportunities for the children, or not children, the students in that program as well as the forestry program.
Yes, certainly could be utilized by their auto program as well.
Else? Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. O'Neill?
Yes.
Dr. Estrab?
Yes.
Mrs. Chilton?
Yes.
Mr. Rue?
Yes.
Mr. Copeland?
Yes.
Providing for supplemental appropriations within various funds and declaring an emergency therein.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Questions or comments from the commission? Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Rue?
Yes.
Mr. O'Neill?
Yes.
Mrs. Chilton?
Yes.
Dr. Estrab?
Yes.
Mr. Copeland?
Yes.
Authorizing the city manager to execute a First Amendment to the promissory note between the city and the Ohio Development Services Agency, formerly known as the Director of Development, State of Ohio, and declaring an emergency therein.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Questions or comments from the commission? Mr. Estrop?
Brian, could you give us a little more information about this, please?
Yeah, I actually do that.
I'd be happy to, Commissioner. This is the remaining balance on our what we called the DOD loan that was associated with the hospital development. When the pandemic hit, the agency, we make monthly payments on this note, and the agency suspended those payments temporarily because of the pandemic and the hardship it caused some of its lendees. So all that we are doing here with this legislation is setting up the reamortization of that note. There's about just a little over 400,000 left on that note, and it will be paid off in February of 2022.
So this is a direct result of the pandemic and the financial constraints that has caused on many.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Clerk will call the roll.
Mrs. Chilton?
Yes.
Dr. Estrom?
Yes.
Mr. O'Neill?
Yes.
Mr. Rue?
Yes.
Mr. Copeland?
Yes.
Authorizing the city manager to execute a mutual aid agreement with Montgomery County and other various participating agencies for the purpose of obtaining and providing additional emergency police protection services for the residents of the city of Springfield and other participating agencies upon their request, and declaring an emergency therein.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Questions or comments from the commission? Clerk will call the roll.
Dr. Estrom?
Yes.
Mrs. Chilton?
Yes.
Mr. O'Neill?
Yes.
Mr. Rue?
Yes.
Mr. Copeland?
Yes.
Authorizing an increase in the cost associated with the construction of 2 covered storage facilities from Clearspan for an amount not to exceed $2,750.08 for a total amount not to exceed $85,007.97 through Sourcewell pursuant to the Sourcewell Contract Purchasing Cooperative Program in accordance with the provisions of Section 9.48 of the Ohio Revised Code and declaring an emergency therein.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Questions or comments from the commission? Clerk
Yes,
will
could-
call. Go ahead.
Could Chris talk about what these are going to be used for?
Yes.
Yes, Commissioner, these 2 clear span structures will be used at the service center to store more road salt for the winter operations and to store sand and gravel primarily for the water distribution division so they can have dry, unfrozen backfill material when they go to fix main breaks during the winter.
Thank you. And these are going to be at the service center?
That is correct. They will be at the rear of the service complex.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. O'Neill?
Yes.
Dr. Estrom?
Yes.
Mr. Rue?
Yes.
Mrs. Chilton?
Yes.
Mr. Copeland?
Yes.
Confirming and approving change order number 4 to the contract between the city and Associated Excavating Incorporated for the Northern Heights Water and Sewer Improvements Project to increase the contract in an amount not to exceed $42,366.61 for a total amount not to exceed $1,090,766.86, and to extend the contract completion date to July 10, 2020, and authorizing the city manager to execute said change order number 4 and declaring an emergency therein.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Questions or comments from the commission?
Yes, I was wondering if Mr. Hack or Mr. Moore could explain what's going on here. Because we're
Yes,
well
Commissioner.
past July 10th.
The completion date change is simply something that needs to be done to make sure that the purchase order matches when the work was complete.
Could you speak
What
a
is-
little louder? We can't hear you very well.
How about now? Is this better?
A little bit.
I apologize. I'm not sure why it's quiet today. The change order itself for $42,000, there is actually 42 lines of different items that were changed. Some were additions, some were subtractions. The biggest item on there was for $40,000, and that was to deal with underground utilities that were encountered during the project that were not known before the project had begun.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Whenever we start digging under the ground, we find stuff sometimes that we didn't expect.
Yeah.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mrs. Chilton?
Yes.
Mr. O'Neill?
Yes.
Mr. Rue?
Yes.
Dr. Estrop?
Yes.
Mr. Copeland?
Yes.
Authorizing the city manager to enter into amendment number 3 to the agreement for consulting engineering services, Eastern Pressure Water District upgrades, Phase 2 preliminary and detailed design, with Burgess and Nyepel Incorporated to increase the contract in an amount not to exceed $1,982.99 for a total amount not to exceed $1,043,085.99 and declaring an emergency therein.
So moved. Estrop.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Questions or comments from the commission? Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Rue?
Yes.
Mr. O'Neill?
Yes?
Mrs. Chilton?
Yes.
Dr. Estrop?
Yes.
Mr. Copeland?
Yes.
Authorizing the city manager to enter into modification number 1 to agreement number 34148 with Crawford Murphy and Tilly Incorporated for the Yellow Spring Street reconstruction, PID number 109491, to increase the agreement amount by $37,374 for a total agreement amount not to exceed $627,881 and declaring an emergency therein.
So moved. Estrop.
Second?
Been moved and seconded. Questions or comments from the commission?
I was wondering if we could have an explanation of this, please.
Chris, would you like to explain?
Yes. So this change is for two things. One, it is to work on separating some combined sewer around Yellow Spring Street and West Washington Street. And the other change is to extend some storm sewer down Yellow Springs a little closer to Columbia. These costs are simply for the design of those sewers, and they are paid for with federal highway money through the Department of Transportation.
Thank you very much.
And what year does this go out for bid, or will it be started?
The Phase 1, Main Street to Pleasant, would be bid in the spring of 2023. Phase 2, Pleasant Street to John, would be bid in the spring of 2024.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Clerk will call the roll.
Mrs. Chilton?
Yes.
Mr. Rue?
Yes.
Mr. O'Neill?
Yes.
Dr. Estrop?
Yes.
Mr. Copeland?
Yes.
Authorizing the city manager to enter into LPA agreement number 30082, amendment number 3 between the city and the Ohio Department of Transportation in connection with the McCrite Avenue project, PID number 104831, to provide clarity regarding the funding sources and declaring an emergency therein.
So moved. Estrop.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Questions or comments from the commission? Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. O'Neill?
Yes.
Mrs. Chilton?
Yes.
Mr. Rue?
Yes.
Dr. Estrop?
Yes.
Mr. Copeland?
Yes.
Authorizing the city manager to enter into LPA agreement number 33109, amendment number 3 between the city and the Ohio Department of Transportation in connection with the Yellow Spring Street reconstruction, Phase 1, PID number 109491, to provide clarity regarding the funding sources and declaring an emergency therein.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Questions or comments from the commission? Clerk will call the roll.
Dr. Estrop?
Yes.
Mr. O'Neill?
Yes.
Mr. Rue?
Yes.
Mrs. Chilton?
Yes.
Mr. Copeland?
Yes.
Finding that public safety personnel are substantially dedicated to mitigating or responding to the COVID-19 public health emergency and declaring an emergency therein.
Move to adopt.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Questions or comments from the commission? Clerk will call the roll.
Mrs. Chilton?
Yes.
Mr. O'Neill?
Yes.
Dr. Estrop?
Yes.
Mr. Rue?
Yes.
Mr. Copeland?
Yes.
Accepting the amounts and rates allocated to the city of Springfield, Ohio, as determined by the Budget Commission of Clark County, Ohio, authorizing the necessary tax levies, providing for the certification of this resolution and the tax levies to the county auditor of Clark County, Ohio, and declaring an emergency therein.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Questions or comments from the commission?
Yes, just one question, so our citizens don't think that we get our basic funding from property taxes. So which funds do get taxes from the county?
Yes, Commissioner. Just to give a little bit of background here, this emergency resolution is the culmination of what started with the tax budget that I presented clear back at the beginning of June. And we do not receive very much funding in the way of property taxes. Most of our funding for general fund comes from income tax, as you well know. But there are three pieces here. The police levy is supported by 3 mills of property tax. We do have a certain amount of old fire and pension debt that's paid off with 0.6 of a mill. And then we have a pass-through levy for the Conservancy District. And this year, that millage floats year to year, but this year it's 0.49 mils.
Oh, it's not basically the general budget, it's those pension funds and the national trails. I think it's the Conservancy District is in there somewhere.
Yes.
Okay.
None of those levies support the general fund.
Okay. Thank you.
What else? Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. O'Neill?
Yes.
Mrs. Chilton?
Yes.
Dr. Estrop?
Yes.
Mr. Rue?
Yes.
Mr. Copeland?
Yes.
Supporting the rescission of House Bill 6 and the restoration of alternative energy targets.
So moved. Estrop.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Questions or comments from the commission? Mr. Estrop.
Thank you, Mayor. This comes to the commission from our alternative energy group. And I'd like to read it its entirety. It's relatively short, but pretty straightforward. Whereas the state of Ohio approved legislation known as House Bill 6, and whereas said legislation bailed out some select energy companies by creating statewide fees to support those select energy companies while eliminating all alternative energy targets and incentives. And whereas after the Ohio Legislative Assembly enacted HB 6 and thereafter multiple indictments have been issued, including but not limited to the Ohio Speaker of the House of Representatives, and whereas the Ohio House of Representatives has formally removed the Speaker as a result of the indictment, now therefore be it resolved by the City Commission of the City of Springfield, Ohio. Section 1. The Springfield City Commission believes that all laws based upon the passage of House Bill 6 should be rescinded as soon as possible and new legislation passed that restores alternative energy targets, adds new energy incentives, and new energy options for the people of Springfield and Ohio. In essence, what we're trying to do is stimulate the development of more alternative energy to break the hold that some energy companies have on the state as a monopoly. And we think, given all that surrounds the passage of House Bill 6, that we need to go on record as a commission calling for the rescission of this bill. Thank you.
I'm going to vote for this motion, but a good friend of mine who I respect a lot, he's now dead, but I still respect him a lot, was of the opinion that we should use the nuclear generation as an interim as opposed to gas and oil. And since we've discovered a lot of gas and oil in Ohio lately, we're becoming more and more dependent on that, which really has a much more negative effect on the environment, especially global warming. But I think this motion is in order, and obviously what was done in Columbus was very wrong.
I might say also, Mayor, your point is well taken, but interestingly, one of the power plants that was associated in receiving support from this legislation is actually a coal-fired plant in Indiana, which I found very interesting.
Yep.
So I would encourage my fellow commissioners to support this resolution.
Which I do.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. O'Neill?
Yes.
Dr. Estrop?
Yes.
Mr. Rue?
Yes.
Mrs. Chilton?
Yes.
Mr. Copeland?
Yes.
The next item has been added to the agenda, reappointing Sabrina Tackett to the National Trail Parks and Recreation District Board of Trustees and declaring an emergency therein.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Questions or comments from the commission? Clerk will call the roll.
Dr. Estrop?
I'm sorry?
Dr. Estrop?
Here, yes, please.
Mrs. Chilton?
Yes.
Mr. Rue?
Yes.
Mr. O'Neill?
Yes.
Mr. Copeland?
Yes. Now, I must confess, there's a lot of times when we meet when I really am glad I'm not Jill. And tonight is one of those. So thanks for the work you do, Jill. Reading this stuff alone is a job I would hate to have. Anything else to come before us from commissioners? Mr. Estrop.
I would just like to ask my same questions. How are we doing relative to COVID and city services? How are we doing on the development of the south end, particularly the replacement of the Kroger store? And then, Mark, how are we doing financially?
Yes, from a standpoint of our staffing levels, we're doing very well. We have a couple quarantines currently in place for city staff members, a couple that are actually maybe not confirmed positive yet, but showing symptoms, so they're on quarantine. And so we ask for thoughts and prayers for them as they battle this virus, and that they can be back with us soon. And but from a city operations standpoint, it has not impacted our level of service. We're still able to provide the same level of services to our residents. And I'll actually point out just a couple items. So our road program is in full swing right now for our neighborhood streets program. As Shelley, our contractor, moves back in, much work has been done in preparation by our service department. All of the divisions have had a hand in getting us ready for our neighborhood streets program, both through utilities, forestry, street, engineering, and the list goes on. And so I just commend them for their continued efforts and continued work on a very important program. As we know through the establishment of the levy in 2017, the neighborhood street program was one of the top priorities in reestablishing that. So we have a lot of work going on. I ask our citizens to bear with us. I know some of the roads, Euclid as an example, has been milled and is getting ready to be pulverized, and so there's little bumps and bruises along the way as we do these projects, but the end product will be great, and we'll be happy to cross more streets off the list that are in much need of repair in our community. I wanted to also commend our community development department and the work that they did associated with the Engaged Neighborhood Plan, but also the Gammon House, which received a dedication of a historic marker on Saturday. They worked with area youth to do something we have not really done before, which was street painting. And so we were able to work with several youth in our community and several leaders. Cheyenne Pinkerman on our staff did a phenomenal job of working with these students, as well as Aaron Clark, who's with Springfield Promise Neighborhood. And so if you have a chance to drive the intersection of Center and Clark Street, take a minute, park on the side of the street, and take a look at the murals. They're actually quilt patterns that were utilized as part of the Underground Railroad to indicate location and direction for those following the path along there. And so just a great project that we were able to do as a community, both not only city staff, but youth and families and adults in our community. It was just a cool project to be a part of, and so I commend our staff for the work that they did on that piece specifically. I also wanted to add that we do plan October 6th, the next commission meeting, to allow the public to come to the meeting. So hopefully maybe the public hearing like we had tonight, less hiccup if people are allowed in here. As you can see, there's some signage. If you walk the corridor outside, there are some signage, a temperature station, and some other safety protocols and measures in place to create social distancing. Masks will be required, and obviously there's no sitting in the front row because of our location, but there's also signage along the other rows to keep space and social distance. So we will allow the public to the next City Commission meeting on October 6th at 7 o'clock. And so I wanted to make that announcement tonight.
Is that date again? October the?
October 6th is the next commission meeting.
Thank you.
Commissioner Chilton and I also got to participate in the unveiling of a plaque at the Gammon House, and that was a really neat experience and was somewhat connected to the street painting.
Yes.
So.
And then your question on South Limestone. So we actually held a meeting last week with, so when we met with stakeholders at the end of July, each group selected 2 to 3 members to serve kind of on a leadership team in the redevelopment process and meet with Larry Dillon. And so Larry and his team, along with city staff, met with those leadership stakeholders last week and were able to present kind of the next steps of the plan. And we're excited. Larry is working diligently on putting together a pro forma and a capital plan for the project itself, but the what he has visioned for that space and kind of reimagine the Four Corners area has a great buy-in from those stakeholder groups, and which represent a much larger group of the community. And so we're excited for that continued development and hope to see some immediate reinvestment in that corridor very soon.
Thanks to you and Tom for allowing me to use some of that information. I had the good fortune to speak to the Promise Neighborhood exec board today, and that plan was very well received. Their only advice is keep on trucking, just keep on moving. So it was very well received, and I really appreciate not only the work, but how the work is being conducted and the time and energy being spent to involve stakeholders so that everyone has a stake in the development of the south side of our community.
I truly believe that's what will make this project sustainable and successful well into the future, as we have the buy-in and support of the community at large. And it's a project for all, and I'm excited to be a part of that, and we're excited to see what happens. And we're cognizant of the fact of the need around food and food access, specifically along that corridor and the surrounding neighborhoods. And so we're hopeful we're able to address that both in the short term and long term.
Thank you.
Mark, I think you're up.
Okay. Well, thank you, Bryan. I'll be brief. We are holding steady as far as our cash goes. We're obviously in the middle of the month, so to speak, for looking at income tax revenues, and probably too early to tell what September is really doing, but it appears that we are on track to be just a little bit lower than last year at the same time.
Good.
But all in all, we've been controlling our expenditures and again, managing the resources we have available and doing well.
I keep up the good work. I know from what the mayor has said and what I've read, other cities across this state have not been as fortunate as we. And I want to commend you and everyone in the city staff for staying on top of this situation financially. But also, clearly the community has responded. Without the passage of the levy, we would not be in this position. We would be in a deep hole, and it would be a hole that was just getting deeper. And we had a number of businesses that were essential businesses that remained open and kept the economy of our area moving. So congratulations to all.
Yeah, the last thing you mentioned has really been, I think, impressive compared to what I hear from other cities in Ohio, that our businesses have stayed up and operating. And since income tax is our primary revenue source, that's key. And I think we've done better than a lot of other cities in that regard.
Absolutely, Mayor. I was just on the phone today with a college teammate of mine who's a city manager in Sydney, and they are not they're not down huge numbers, but they're down significantly more than we are as far as their income tax goes. So it's a testament to our employers here in Springfield.
I have a couple of things to add. I just wanted to remind our citizens that October the 5th is the last day to register to vote, and some people who have criminal records don't believe they can vote or register. But in Ohio, as long as you're not in jail or in prison, you can register to vote. And the next thing was I wanted to thank the leaders of change for their town hall meeting on September the 5th, and I hope that they use the pocket edition of the Constitution that I left with them, because now we are faced with, there will be an appointment for another Supreme Court justice. So we need to take a look at all that and the Constitution behind that. And the next thing, I want to thank Logan Cobb from the city of Springfield for the City Appreciation Day for our SCAT bus drivers. It was great. So thank you, Logan.
On the lighter side, since we're going to probably have trick or treat, it is on Saturday this year. Many parents have already said how happy they are if we have it. But it's good that we are going to try to have it, and it's on Saturday. Even though Halloween is on Saturday this year, that's good. But I would recommend that the sheriff makes this decision, as we talked last year, that we would recommend or like to see it on a Saturday closest to when it happens. It just makes more sense for the families. Thank you.
Anything else from commissioners?
I just have a question. Is our county health commissioner okay with this, with Halloween?
It's in the paper.
Yeah, I spoke with Commissioner Patterson when the sheriff released that, and he is in support of it as long as they follow the
that's it.
guidelines that were put down from the state and both the CDC. So he is supportive of it, again, as long as the guidelines are
Right.
followed.
That's why I used the word if.
Thank you, Kevin.
Yes, dear.
Anything else? Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved, Esther.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Clerk will call the roll.
Mrs. Chilton?
Yes.
Dr. Estra?
Yes.
Mr. O'Neill?
Yes.
Mr. Rue?
Yes.
Yes, meeting's adjourned.